My parents thought selling my car to fund my sister's honeymoon was a harmless sacrifice I was too weak to fight. They laughed about it in the living room, unaware I was listening from the hallway. They think I am helpless, but they forgot about the secret account they opened 20 years ago. They lost the paperwork, but I found it, and tonight I am cashing out every single cent. My name is Claire Hawthorne, in the manicured, hedge-lined streets of Northlake, Connecticut. That name was supposed to mean something. It was supposed to evoke images of garden parties, Ivy League degrees, and summer homes in the Hamptons. And for the most part, it did. My parents, Richard and Eleanor, were the picture of old money elegance, even if the cash flow had not been quite as fluid in recent years as they pretended. My older sister, Brooke, was the crown jewel, the golden child who had never stepped a foot wrong in her 29 years of existence. She was currently floating on a cloud of pre-wedding bliss, documenting every second of her perfect life for an audience of 50,000 followers on Instagram. And then there was me. To the Hawthorne family, I was the glitch in the system, the quiet one, the one who did not rush a sorority, the one who worked a job they vaguely described to their friends as IT support, because explaining my actual role in cybersecurity infrastructure was too tedious for them. They called me the lost child. They whispered that I lacked ambition, that I was content to drift through life without making a splash. They looked at my nondescript sedan and my rented apartment in the city and saw failure. They did not know that silence was not the same thing as stupidity. They did not know that while they were busy curating their public image, I was busy observing the cracks in the foundation. It was a Tuesday night in late November when the first crack turned into a shatter. I had driven home to Northlake for a mandatory family dinner. My father had insisted on my presence, his voice on the phone carrying that specific tone of paternal authority that suggested refusal was not an option. The drive had been long, the traffic out of the city brutal, and by the time I pulled my silver SUV into the crushed gravel driveway, it was past 8 in the evening. The house was imposing, a colonial revival beast that loomed against the dark sky. Every window on the ground floor was blazing with light. I killed the engine and sat there for a moment, gripping the leather steering wheel. This car was the one thing I had splurged on 2 years ago. It was reliable, safe, and it was mine. Or at least, I had paid every single monthly installment on it for the last 24 months. I let myself in through the side door, the one that led into the mudroom. I was about to announce my arrival, to put on the mask of the dutiful, slightly disappointing daughter, but the sound of voices drifting from the formal living room stopped me cold. The acoustics in the house were strange. If you stood in the hallway just past the kitchen, you could hear everything said in the living room as if you were standing next to the fireplace. Usually, I would have made noise, scuffed my boots, or called out a hello, but something in my mother's tone froze my feet to the hardwood floor. It was a tone I recognized. It was the voice she used when she was planning a charity gala or negotiating with a caterer. It was transactionary. "We cannot send her to the Caribbean, Richard," my mother was saying. "Not for a honeymoon like this. Brooke has been talking about the Amalfi Coast for 6 months. She has already tagged the location in 3 posts. If she ends up in just a standard resort in Nassau, it will look cheap. The Rutherfords are sending their daughter to Bora Bora. We have to match that level." I stayed in the shadows, leaning against the wall. "I know what Brooke wants, Eleanor," my father replied, his voice heavy with the stress of someone trying to juggle prestige with a checking account that did not always agree. "But the liquidity is not there right now. The market has been soft, and the renovation on the lake house went 40% over budget. We are looking at $30,000 for the package she wants, minimum." "We have to find it," my mother snapped. "This is not just a vacation. It is a statement. Brooke is marrying into the Sterling family. We cannot look like we are pinching pennies." There was a pause, the sound of ice clinking against glass. Then my father spoke again, his voice lower, more conspiratorial. "I spoke to Colin today." My stomach tightened. Colin Rusk, my ex-boyfriend, the man who had broken up with me 3 years ago because I was too intense, only to reinvent himself as a flashy luxury asset broker who catered to families exactly like mine. And? My mother asked. He has a buyer for the SUV, my father said. I stopped breathing. The air in the hallway seemed to vanish. For how much? $28,000, my father said. Cash? Fast close. He can have the paperwork ready by tomorrow morning. He says the market for that model is hot right now, and he has a client looking for that exact trim. 28, my mother mused, the calculation audible in her voice. That covers almost the entire flight and the suite at the Positano Cliffside Hotel. We can put the rest on the black card. It is the only asset we can liquidate that quickly without raising eyebrows at the bank, my father reasoned. The title is still under the family trust name. Technically, I never got around to transferring it fully to Claire when she started making the payments. My hands curled into fists at my sides. I had paid for that car, every cent, but he was right. 2 years ago, when I bought it, my credit score had been recovering from a student loan mix-up, and my father had offered to put it under the family umbrella for insurance purposes. We are family, he had said. It saves money. He had said. I had trusted him. But what about Claire? My mother asked. For a second, a foolish, naive part of me thought she was concerned. I thought she was going to ask how I would get to work, how I would visit my clients, how I would survive the winter in a city with unreliable public transit. What about her? My father asked, dismissive. She is going to make a scene, my mother said. You know how she gets. She is so particular about her things. She will get over it, my father said. She lives in the city. She can take the train. Millions of people do it. Besides, she hardly uses the car for anything important. She just drives to that office and back. It is a waste of a vehicle. Brooke needs the honeymoon. It is a once-in-a-lifetime event. True, my mother agreed. And honestly, Claire doesn't understand paperwork. If we just put the transfer forms in front of her with the other insurance documents we said we needed her to sign for the house liability, she will just sign them. She never reads the fine print. She is not sharp like Brooke. The insult hit me harder than the theft. She doesn't understand paperwork. They thought I was stupid. They thought that because I did not brag about my promotions or flash my bonuses, I was some helpless creature who needed them to navigate the world. She relies on that car. Richard, my mother added, though her voice lacked any real empathy. It is her only real asset. She relies on us, my father corrected her, and if she wants to stay part of this family, she will do what contributes to the greater good. Brooke's happiness is the priority. Claire is resilient. She is used to making do with less. Signing the car over is the least she can do after all the support we have given her. Support. I nearly laughed out loud. The support they spoke of was a myth. I had been financially independent since I was 22, while Brooke, at 31, still had her rent paid by the family trust. I heard footsteps approaching the hallway. I had seconds to make a decision. I could storm in there, screaming. I could throw a vase against the wall. I could threaten to sue them. But that is what the old Claire would have done. The emotional, unstable Claire they loved to pity. If I exploded now, they would just treat me like a hysterical child. They would gaslight me. Tell me I was being selfish. Tell me I was ruining Brooke's moment. They would talk over me until I was exhausted, and then they would guilt me into signing anyway. No. I took a deep breath, smoothing the expression on my face into one of tired neutrality. I stepped back toward the mudroom door, opened it, and slammed it shut loud enough to echo. "Hello?" I called out, pitching my voice to sound weary and unsuspecting. "Sorry I'm late. Traffic was a nightmare on 95. I walked into the living room. My parents were sitting on the white linen sofas, their postures relaxing instantly. The tension in the room evaporated, replaced by the practiced smiles of the North Lake elite. "Claire, darling," my mother said, standing up to offer me a stiff hug. She smelled of expensive Chardonnay and deception. "We were just worried about you." "Hi, Mom. Hi, Dad," I said, dropping my bag on the floor. I looked at my father. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He was busy pouring himself another scotch. Good to see you, kid, he mumbled. Sit down. We have some business to discuss before dinner. I sat in the armchair opposite them. The leather was cold against my back. On the coffee table, between a vase of white lilies and a stack of Architectural Digest magazines, sat a neat pile of documents. What is this? I asked, pointing to the papers. My mother shared a look with my father. It was a look that said, "Let me handle this." "We have some exciting news," she began, her voice bright and fake. "You know how stressed Brooke has been about the wedding costs and the honeymoon." "Sure," I said. "The Amalfi Coast, right?" "Exactly," she beamed, ignoring the fact that I shouldn't have known that detail yet. "Well, your father and I have been looking at the family finances. We want to make sure everything is perfect for her, and we realize that we have some redundancies in our assets, specifically regarding transportation." "Transportation?" I asked, widening my eyes, playing the part of the confused daughter. "The SUV," my father cut in, finally looking at me. His face was hard, daring me to challenge him. "We have found a buyer, a very good price. We are selling it to fund the honeymoon package Brooke deserves." I let my mouth fall open slightly. "My car? But, Dad, I paid for that car. I drive it to work every day." "Technically," my mother said, her voice soothing and condescending. "The title is in the family name, remember? It was for the insurance rates, so legally, it is a family asset. And right now, the family needs liquidity." "But how am I supposed to get to work?" I asked, letting a wobble enter my voice. "The train station is 3 miles from my apartment. The schedule is awful." "You will figure it out," my father said, pushing the papers toward me across the table. "You are smart enough to read a train schedule. Claire, don't be selfish. Your sister is getting married. This is a gift you can give her, a contribution." I don't know," I stammered. I looked at the papers. It was a standard transfer of ownership form, alongside a power of attorney document specifically regarding the vehicle. They had it all laid out. "This seems so sudden." "It has to be done tonight," my mother said, handing me a pen, a Mont Blanc, heavy and black. "The buyer needs the papers first thing in the morning to wire the funds. If we miss this window, Brooke loses her reservation at the hotel." She leaned forward, her eyes locking onto mine. "Claire, honey, listen to me. You don't want to be the reason your sister's honeymoon is ruined, do you? You don't want to be that person. Just sign. It is just paperwork. It is complicated, but it basically just shifts the liability off us. You do not need to worry about the details. You probably wouldn't understand half the legal jargon anyway." There it was again, the underestimation, the arrogance. "If I sign this," I asked, my voice barely a whisper, "I lose the car? Immediately?" "It is for the best," my father said. "You rely on that car too much anyway. It is a crutch. This will force you to be more adaptable, more urban." I looked down at the paper. I saw the line for the signature. I saw the date. I saw the betrayal printed in black and white. Standard font, size 12. They were not asking. They were taking. If I refused, they would just forge it or use the fact that the title was in the trust to sell it out from under me anyway. Fighting now would only alert them to the fact that I was an enemy. I needed them to think I was defeated. I needed them to think I was the same Claire they had walked over for 29 years. "Okay," I said softly. "For Brooke." My mother let out a sigh of relief that sounded like a tire deflating. "Oh, thank you. Claire, I knew you would be reasonable." I took the pen. I kept my hand shaky as I signed my name on the dotted line. Claire Hawthorne. The ink looked dark and permanent. My father snatched the papers away the second I lifted the pen, as if afraid I would try to eat them. "Good," he said, standing up. "Colin will be pleased. We will take the car keys now. You can take the train back to the city tomorrow morning. I will drive you to the station." I dug the keys out of my pocket and placed them on the table. It felt like cutting off a finger, but I did it. "I am not feeling well," I said, standing up. "I think I'm just going to go to my old room and lie down. I don't want dinner." "Suit yourself," my mother said, already reaching for her phone. probably to text Brooke the good news. We will save you a plate. I walked up the grand staircase, my steps heavy, listening to them celebrate downstairs. I heard the pop of a cork. They were toasting. They were toasting to their cleverness, to their manipulation, to the successful cannibalization of their youngest daughter. I entered my childhood bedroom. It was exactly as I had left it, a museum of a person I no longer was. I closed the door and locked it. I did not cry. I did not throw myself on the bed. I walked to the window and looked out at the driveway. I saw my silver SUV sitting there under the moonlight. It was already gone. They had already sold it. But they had made a mistake, a fatal, arrogant mistake. They thought that because I didn't fight for the car, I had nothing left to fight with. They thought money was the only power that mattered. And because they controlled the family trust, they controlled me. They forgot about the other account. Years ago, when I was 9 and Brooke was 11, my grandfather had insisted on opening custodial accounts for us. My parents, lazy with details even then, had set them up through a tangled web of shell companies they used to dodge taxes. They had forgotten about mine the moment I turned 18 and didn't immediately ask for a payout. They assumed it was empty or dormant, or absorbed back into the main trust. But I knew where it was, and I knew exactly who had the keys to the back door of their entire financial house of cards. I pulled my phone from my pocket. The screen glowed in the dark room. I opened a secure messaging app, the kind my parents didn't even know existed. I scrolled to a contact listed only as E. I typed a message, my fingers moving steady and fast, the shaky hand from downstairs gone completely. Get me the transaction history. Tonight, the lock on my bedroom door was a physical barrier, but the laptop sitting on my duvet was the gateway to the only world where I held the power, to my family. I was Claire the IT girl who probably reset passwords for a living. In reality, I was a senior forensic analyst and minority shareholder at Cindergate Security. My job was not fixing printers. My job was hunting down financial anomalies for Fortune 500 companies, tracing embezzled funds through shell corporations, and locking down data leaks that could topple CEOs. I did not talk about my work at the dinner table. I did not talk about my salary, which had surpassed my father's 3 years ago, or the stock options that had vested last quarter. I had learned early on that in the Hawthorne house, money was not a private resource. It was a communal pool for Brooke's whims. If I had revealed my net worth, I would have become their permanent ATM. So, I let them believe I was scraping by. I let them believe the silver SUV was the only valuable thing I owned. I opened my laptop, the screen illuminating the dark room with a harsh blue light. I bypassed the standard Wi-Fi and tethered to my secure hotspot. The first thing I did was pull up the dossier I had been building for 5 years. They thought the secret account was gone. 20 years ago, my grandfather had set up custodial trusts for Brooke and me. My father, believing himself a financial wizard, had restructured them to avoid capital gains taxes, moving the assets into a complex hold that required specific renewal signatures every 5 years. They had remembered Brooke's, of course, because they dipped into it constantly for her ballet lessons and summer camps. But mine? They had forgotten to file the paperwork when I turned 18. They assumed the bank had absorbed the fees or that the money was trapped in probate limbo. They were wrong. The money had not vanished. It had compounded. And because of the clerical error my father made in the initial setup, the control of the account had defaulted entirely to the beneficiary upon my 25th birthday, provided I knew the access codes. I knew the access codes. I logged into the secure portal. The balance flashed on the screen. It was enough to buy my SUV 10 times over. It was enough to walk away from this family and never look back. But walking away was not enough. Not anymore. Tonight was about leverage. I opened a secondary window and initiated an encrypted chat session. User: E. Marsh is online. Elliot Marsh was my personal counsel, a man who viewed the legal system as a series of bear traps he enjoyed setting for others. We had met during a data breach investigation at his firm, and he was the only person who knew exactly how much I was worth. Claire, I need you to pull the deed history on the house and the current liquidity of the Hawthorne Family Trust. Also, run a background check on a recent transaction involving Colin Rusk. Elliot. It is late. Claire, is everything all right? Claire. They sold my car tonight. Without my permission, they forced a signature. Elliot. That is coercion. We can file an injunction in the morning. Claire. No injunctions. Not yet. I want to see the paper trail first. I switched tabs while Elliot worked his magic. I had access to my parents' email servers because 5 years ago, my father had asked me to fix the slow internet, and I had installed a mirror protocol to monitor for phishing attacks. I had never turned it off. It was invasive, perhaps, but tonight it was my greatest weapon. I filtered the search results by keyword: Brooke, Honeymoon, Colin, SUV. The emails populated the screen in a long, damning list. I clicked on a thread dated 2 weeks ago. From Eleanor Hawthorne. To Colin Rusk. Subject: Urgent. Liquidity for wedding expenses. Colin. Darling, we are in a bit of a bind. Brooke has her heart set on the Positano Cliffside Suite, the one with the private terrace. The travel agent says it is $30,000 for the week. Payment up front. We are a little short until the quarterly dividends come in. Your uncle mentioned you have clients looking for luxury vehicles. I read the reply. From Colin Rusk. To Eleanor Hawthorne. Subject: Urgent. Eleanor, I can help. I have a buyer looking for a clean SUV. If it is Claire's model, I can move it fast. I will waive my usual broker fee for the family. Of course, just a small administrative commission of 15% on the back end from the buyer side. We can list it at $28,000. That gets you the cash for the hotel by Wednesday. I stared at the screen. 15%. Colin was taking a $4,200 cut. He was not doing them a favor. He was stripping the car for parts and charging them for the privilege, and my parents were too desperate to notice. My ex-boyfriend was profiting off my misery to send my sister to Italy. I dug deeper. I pulled up the credit card statements attached to the family trust. I cross-referenced them with Brooke's Instagram timeline. May 14th. Brooke posts a photo of a surprise vintage Chanel bag. May 14th. A charge of $4,500 on my father's American Express. August 3rd. Brooke posts about her self-made spa weekend in the Berkshires. August 3rd. A wire transfer from the Family Emergency Fund. The fund they told me was empty when I needed dental surgery last year, sent directly to the resort. It was a pattern of systematic siphoning. They were not just selling my car because they were broke. They were selling my car because they refused to tell Brooke no. They were cannibalizing my stability to maintain her fantasy. A ping from the chat window brought me back. Elliot, I have the transaction details. The sale of the SUV is pending wire transfer at 9 a.m. tomorrow. The buyer is an LLC registered in Delaware, but the signatory is a known associate of Colin Rusk. It is a flip. They are going to resell the car for $35,000 by the end of the week. So, my car was worth $35,000. My father had sold it for $28,000. They had lost $7,000 of value just to get cash fast enough for a hotel reservation. The incompetence was staggering. Elliot. Also, Claire, I looked at the structure of the document you described signing. If it is the standard power of attorney template your father uses, it has a loophole. It grants them authority to sell the specific asset, but it does not waive your right to the proceeds unless explicitly stated in a separate waiver. Claire, I did not sign a waiver. I only signed the transfer and the power of attorney. Elliot, then legally, that $28,000 belongs to you. If they spend it on a travel agency, they are committing embezzlement against a family member. I leaned back in my chair. The anger was gone, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. This was not a family dispute anymore. This was a forensic audit. I opened a fresh spreadsheet. I titled it Case File, Hawthorne Liquidation. Column A, the asset, 2021, silver SUV. Column B, the fraudulent value, $28,000. Column C, the beneficiary of the fraud, Brooke Hawthorne. Column D, The facilitator, Colin Rusk. I began to type out a list of demands, not for tonight, not for tomorrow, but for the moment the trap snapped shut. Elliot, what is the play? Claire, do we freeze the transfer? Claire, no, let the money hit their account. Let them pay the travel agent. Let Brooke pack her bags. I need the transaction to be completed so the theft is irreversible. Elliot, you are playing a dangerous game. Once that money leaves the country for a hotel in Italy, recovering it will be difficult. Claire, I do not want the money back. Elliot, I want the leverage. Draft the document we talked about last month, the separation of assets agreement, but I want you to add a clause hidden in plain sight. Elliot, the one regarding the custodial account? Claire, yes, and I want you to structure a buyback option for the vehicle contract. Use the shell company we set up for my consulting work. I want to be the one who buys the debt on that car. I looked at the time. It was 2 a.m. Downstairs. The house was silent. My parents were sleeping soundly, dreaming of the perfect wedding photos that would impress their friends. Brooke was likely asleep in her apartment across town, dreaming of pasta and limoncello. They thought they had won. They thought they had pruned the dead weight from the family tree. I saved the spreadsheet and closed the laptop. I walked over to the mirror and looked at my reflection. I looked tired. I looked pale. I looked exactly like the victim they needed me to be. Tomorrow, I would play the part. I would let them see the red eyes. I would let them see the hesitation. I would let them hand me the next stack of papers, the ones they would inevitably draft to cover their tracks and absolve themselves of guilt. They would offer me some pittance, some small allowance to keep me quiet, and ask for one more signature. And I would give it to them. I picked up my phone and sent one last message to Elliot. Claire, prepare the paperwork. Make the font size on the addendum small. Standard legal boilerplate style. I turned off the light, plunging the room into darkness. If they believe I do not read the fine print, I will make them sign something they never wanted to sign. The morning sun did not bring clarity. It brought notification pings. My phone had been buzzing incessantly since 7 a.m, vibrating against the nightstand like an angry hornet. I rolled over, my head throbbing from a sleepless night spent staring at spreadsheets, and grabbed the device. I expected emails from Elliot. What I got was a social media ambush. Brooke had been busy. While I was plotting forensic countermeasures, she was curating a narrative. She had posted a photo on Instagram and Facebook, a throwback picture from last Christmas. In the photo, Brooke looked radiant in red velvet, holding a champagne flute. I was in the background, caught mid-sneeze, looking disheveled and slightly out of focus. It was the kind of photo a loving sister deletes. Brooke had framed it. The caption read, "So incredibly grateful for my parents, who are always there to make the hard decisions for our family. Sometimes, letting go of material things is the first step toward true independence. Sending love to my little sister as she transitions to a more sustainable lifestyle. We are all chipping in to make sure everyone finds their path. Family. First tough love, new beginnings." I scrolled down to the comments. It was a bloodbath of passive-aggressive pity. Aunt Linda. Such wise parents you have. Brooke. It is hard to see a sibling struggle to launch, but cutting the cord is necessary. Praying for Claire. Cousin Sarah. You are such a good sister for being so supportive. Brooke. Hope the honeymoon is amazing. You deserve it after all the stress. Random family friend. Richard and Eleanor are saints. It is not easy supporting an adult child in this economy. I stared at the screen, my grip tightening until my knuckles turned white. They were not just stealing my car. They were rewriting my reality. They were painting me as a leech, a failure who needed to be managed by the benevolent Hawthorne estate. They were publicly justifying the theft before I could even open my mouth to complain, by framing the sale of my SUV as a tough love intervention to help me downsize. They inoculated themselves against any accusations of greed. If I complained now, I would just look like a spoiled brat resisting her parents' wise guidance. It was a masterclass in gaslighting. A sharp knock on my bedroom door made me jump. Claire? My mother's voice was crisp, lacking any of the warmth she performed for her friends. Your father and I are waiting in the study. We need to finalize the details before you head back to the city. Come down, now. I took a breath, holding it in my lungs for a count of 4. Showtime. I dragged myself out of bed, splashed cold water on my face, and did not bother to cover the dark circles under my eyes. If they wanted a defeated daughter, I would give them a wreck. I put on a pair of slightly wrinkled joggers and an oversized sweater, the uniform of the depressed and aimless. When I entered the study, the smell of old leather and expensive cologne hit me. My father was sitting behind his massive mahogany desk, a fortress he had built to separate himself from the rest of us. My mother stood by the window, arms crossed, looking at the manicured lawn. But it was the third person in the room who made my stomach turn. Sitting in one of the guest wingback chairs, looking entirely too comfortable, was Colin Rusk. He wore a tailored navy suit that cost more than my first apartment. His hair was gelled to perfection, and he wore that practiced, smarmy smile that had once fooled me into thinking he was charming. Seeing him here, in the heart of my family's sanctuary, confirming the betrayal, felt like a physical blow. "Morning, Claire," Colin said, his voice smooth like oil. "You look comfortable." "Colin," I said, keeping my voice small. "What are you doing here?" "Colin is here as a neutral party," my father said, gesturing for me to sit in the low chair opposite him. It was a power move. The chair was significantly lower than his desk, forcing me to look up at him like a child. "He is handling the logistics of the transaction. We wanted to make sure everything was done above board." "Above board," I repeated, letting a tremor enter my voice. "You mean selling my car?" "We mean restructuring your assets," my mother corrected. Turning from the window, she walked over and stood next to my father, presenting a united front. "We saw the post Brooke made. It is good that the family is rallying around this decision. It makes it easier for everyone." My father pushed a folder across the desk. "We need to formalize the arrangement we discussed last night. Since the vehicle title was technically in the trust, the proceeds of the sale go to the trust. That is just the law. Claire." It was not the law. It was a convenient interpretation of a structure they had manipulated, but I nodded, staring at the floor. "However," he continued, looking benevolent, "we do not want to leave you high and dry. We are family, after all. So, we have prepared a family support agreement." I looked at the document. It was 3 pages long. "What is this?" I asked, reaching for it with a trembling hand. "It is an agreement," Colin explained, leaning forward. "Basically, it states that you acknowledge the sale of the 2021 SUV and agree that the proceeds, $28,000, are being reallocated to family expenses. In exchange, your parents are generously providing you with a transitional allowance." "An allowance?" I looked up, widening my eyes. $2,000, my father said, as if he were bestowing a kingdom upon me. "It is a check. You can take it today. That should cover your train fare for the next few months, and maybe some Uber rides until you figure out a more appropriate budget for your lifestyle." I did the math in my head instantly. They were taking an asset worth $35,000, selling it for $28,000 to get fast cash, and giving me back $2,000. They were netting $26,000 to blow on Prosecco and pasta in Italy, and I was supposed to say thank you. "But Dad," I whimpered, leaning into the role. "That car. I worked so hard to make the payments. I need it for my job. The train is unreliable. What if I get fired because I'm late?" "Then you find a job closer to your apartment," my mother snapped, her patience fraying. "Or you move. Honestly, Claire, stop being so dramatic. Most girls your age would kill for $2,000 cash. Brooke is over the moon that you are finally contributing. She told me this morning that she feels like you are finally part of her happiness. Do not ruin that for her." Brooke walked in right on cue. She was glowing, holding a latte, wearing a white silk robe that screamed bride. "Oh, good. We are all here," she chirped. She floated over and draped an arm around my shoulders. I flinched, but she squeezed tighter. "Claire, Bear, I just wanted to say thank you. I know you love that car, but think of it this way. You are literally paying for the memories I will have forever. That is so special. You are like the sponsor of my joy. I felt bile rise in my throat. Sponsor of her joy. I sniffled, wiping a non-existent tear from my cheek. I just feel like I'm losing everything. You are not losing everything, Colin said, tapping the paper. You are gaining a safety net. But Claire, listen to me as a friend. You need to sign this. If you do not sign this acknowledgement, the trust cannot release the $2,000 check. And technically, without this agreement, your parents could argue that by driving a trust vehicle for 2 years, you owe them for mileage and depreciation. The threat was subtle, but it was there. Sign, or we will bill you for the car you paid for. He is right, my father said, his voice dropping to that dangerous octave. We are trying to do this the nice way. Claire, we are trying to keep this civilized. But if you want to fight us on this, if you want to cause a scene or refuse to cooperate, then we are done. No $2,000, no safety net. And frankly, if you cannot respect the family's needs, maybe you should not be coming home for Christmas this year. The ultimatum hung in the air. Sign or get out. I looked at the three of them. My father, the failing patriarch desperate to keep up appearances. My mother, the enforcer. Brooke, the parasite dressed in silk. And Colin, the vulture picking at the bones. They looked at me with a mixture of pity and disdain. They saw a broken girl in a baggy sweater. They had no idea they were looking at the architect of their ruin. I do not want to be cut off, I whispered, letting my voice crack. I want to be part of the family. Then sign, my mother urged. Be a good sister. I picked up the pen. It felt heavy in my hand. I looked at the document. It was a release of claims. By signing this, I was legally waiving my right to sue them for the proceeds of the car sale. I was validating their narrative that this was a mutual exchange. To them, this document was a shield. To me, it was the final piece of evidence I needed. It proved premeditation. It proved they knew the asset was mine effectively, which was why they needed me to sign away the claim to it. It proved coercion. I bent over the desk and scribbled my name. Claire Hawthorne. I made the signature look messy, weak. There, I said, dropping the pen. My father snatched the paper immediately, scanning it to ensure it was valid. He smiled, a genuine, relieved smile. Good girl. I knew you would see reason. He opened his checkbook and wrote out a check for $2,000. He ripped it out and slid it across the desk toward me. Use it wisely, he advised. Do not spend it all on whatever it is you do in the city. Thank you, Dad, I said. Taking the check, I folded it carefully and put it in my pocket. Then I looked up, keeping my eyes wide and innocent. Can I just ask one thing? I asked. What now? My mother sighed. Can I have a copy? I pointed to the agreement I had just signed. Just for my own records? So I can budget? I want to make sure I understand the terms of the allowance so I don't ask for more later. My father laughed. It was a dry barking sound. For your budget? Sure, Claire, if it makes you feel better. He handed the document to Colin. Make a copy for her. Would you, Colin? There is a printer in the hallway. Colin smirked at me as he took the paper. Sure thing, Claire. I will even staple it for you. He walked out. I sat there, enduring Brooke's monologue about how the Amalfi sunlight was going to look on her skin, while my parents discussed flight upgrades. 5 minutes later, Colin returned. He handed me a crisp, warm photocopy of the document. Here you go, he said. Don't lose it. I took the paper. I felt the heat of the toner against my fingertips. I won't, I said. I will keep it very safe. I stood up. I think I'm going to head to the train station now. I need to figure out the schedule. Good idea, my father said, already turning back to his computer. Colin can drop you off. He has his car. Actually, Colin said, checking his watch, I have to meet the buyer for the SUV in 20 minutes. I can drop you at the station on the way. You can say goodbye to the car." It was one final twist of the knife. He wanted me to ride in my own car. One last time, while he drove it to sell it. "That would be great, Colin," I said. "Thank you." I walked out of the study, clutching the photocopy to my chest. They thought the paper was my surrender. They didn't know it was the key to the handcuffs I was about to slap on them. As I walked down the hallway, I looked at the document one last time. It had the date. It had the signatures. It had the explicit admission that they had sold the car for $28,000, and most importantly, it had Colin's signature as a witness. I had the paper trail, I had the confession, and in my pocket, I had a check for $2,000 that linked the family trust directly to the transaction. Brooke was going to get her honeymoon, but I was going to ensure it was a trip she would never, ever forget. The document Elliot Marsh had prepared was a masterpiece of bureaucratic camouflage. It arrived in my secure inbox at 10 in the morning, titled simply Asset Liquidation and Familial Liability Release Form C90. To the untrained eye, it looked exactly like the dozen other dull, legalistic forms my father had been shoving in front of me for the last 24 hours. It had the same dense paragraphs, the same intimidating headers, and the same font that seemed designed to induce a migraine. But it was a trap, a beautiful, ironclad trap. I printed it out at the local library near the train station, using a public terminal so there would be no digital footprint on the home network. The paper was warm in my hands, a stack of 12 pages that felt heavier than its physical weight. I returned to the house at noon. The atmosphere was chaotic. Brooke's flight was scheduled for 6 in the evening, and the house was a whirlwind of last-minute packing, frantic calls to the kennel for her poodle, and my mother shouting instructions to the housekeeper, the notary, a stern woman named Mrs. Gable, who had serviced the Hawthorne legal needs for a decade, was already set up at the dining room table, her embosser ready like a loaded weapon. "You are back," my father said, barely looking up from his tablet. "Did you catch a train?" "I missed the 11 o'clock, I lied, my voice trembling just enough to sell the anxiety. "And I got a call from the bank." That got his attention. "The bank? Why is the bank calling you?" "It is about the SUV, I said, clutching the folder Elliot had sent me against my chest. Apparently, because the original purchase down payment 3 years ago was routed through a subledger of the custodial account. The bank cannot fully clear the title for Colin's buyer unless we clarify the origin of funds. They said the sale might be flagged for a 30-day hold if we do not sign a waiver. 30 days? My mother stopped folding a silk scarf, her face draining of color. "We do not have 30 days. We need that wire transfer to clear today. Brooke leaves in 6 hours. "I know," I said, stepping into the room. "That is why they sent me this. It is a standard Holman Act waiver. It basically just says that we all agree the car is being sold, and that none of us have any conflicting financial claims against each other regarding family assets. It clears the path for the immediate release of funds." I placed the stack of papers on the table in front of Mrs. Gable. "It is just more red tape," I added, looking defeated. "I guess I have to sign it too." My father grabbed the document. He flipped through the first 2 pages. They were exactly what I said they were. Boring definitions of vehicle identification numbers and transfer protocols. Elliot had written them to be mind-numbingly dull. "It looks standard," my father muttered, glancing at Colin, who was leaning against the sideboard eating an apple. "Colin, have you seen this form before?" Colin walked over, chewed, and glanced at the header. "Yeah, the Holman waiver. Banks are getting sticky about money laundering compliance lately. It is just boilerplate stuff to prove you are not washing money through the car. Just sign it so I can get the wire initiated." Colin did not read it. He recognized the header because Elliot had used a very common, very recognizable template style. But Colin did not know that Elliot had surgically altered the body of the text. "Fine," my father said, irritated. "Let's get this over with. Mrs. Gable, where do we sign?" "I need to witness all signatures," Mrs. Gable said professionally, adjusting her glasses. I sat down first. I will sign, I said, my voice small. I just want this to be over. I turned to the last page, page 12, where the signature block was. I signed my name with a shaky hand, letting the pen drag slightly. Claire Hawthorne. The picture of a girl forced to sell her pride. Okay, I said, sliding the stack toward my father. You have to initial the bottom of every page. Dad, and Mom too, and Brooke, since she is the beneficiary of the funds. Jesus, so much paperwork, Brooke complained, walking over with her phone in one hand. I have not even packed my toiletries bag yet. Just sign it, Brooke, my father snapped. We need the money. My father began to sign. He initialed page 1, page 2, page 3. He was moving fast, his eyes barely scanning the text. He was thinking about the $30,000. He was thinking about the reputation he was saving. He reached page 7. My heart hammered against my ribs so hard I thought they could hear it. Page 7, paragraph 3. It was buried in the middle of a dense block of text about liability limitations, but the words were specific. Elliot had drafted them with lethal precision. The undersigned parties, herein referred to as the guardians and beneficiaries, hereby voluntarily and irrevocably waive, release, and relinquish any and all rights, claims, titles, or interests, whether current or future, in any financial accounts, trusts, or custodial instruments bearing the name or social security number of the primary signatory, Claire Hawthorne. Regardless of the origin of the initial deposit, this waiver serves as a total separation of financial entities, granting the primary signatory sole and exclusive authority over said instruments effective immediately upon notarization. It was a total surrender. By signing this to get the car money released, they were legally severing themselves from the secret account. They were admitting that anything with my name on it was mine and mine alone, forever. My father's pen hovered over page 7. He paused to scratch his nose. What is this section? He muttered, squinting at the fine print. Time stopped. If he read it, really read it, he would see it. It is the liability clause, Colin said from the corner, checking his watch. It just says if the car breaks down, the buyer cannot sue Claire. Standard stuff. Richard, come on. The bank closes the wire window in 45 minutes. Right, my father said. Standard. He scribbled his initials on page 7. He passed the stack to my mother. She did not even look at the pages. She just looked at where my father had signed and copied him. She initialed page 7 with a flourish, her mind already in Italy. Then it was Brooke's turn. Do I really have to? She whined. Yes, I said, looking at her. To get your honeymoon. She huffed, grabbed the pen, and aggressively initialed the pages. When she got to page 7, she was actually looking at her phone, texting her fiancé. She signed away her claim to my fortune while sending a heart emoji. And you, Mr. Rusk, Mrs. Gable said, you are the witness? Yup, Colin said. He stepped up. He did not read a single word. He just signed the witness line on the final page, certifying that the Hawthorne family had entered into this agreement of their own free will. Mrs. Gable took the stack. She picked up her heavy metal embosser. She lined it up with the gold foil sticker on the final page. Clunk. The sound was heavy, final, and satisfying. The raised seal crimped the paper. It was done. The document was now a legally binding instrument, witnessed by a notary public and a third-party broker. I need a copy, I said immediately. For the bank, I have to fax it to them to release the hold. Of course, Mrs. Gable said. She separated the carbon copies. She handed one pristine, stamped set to my father, and one to me. My father tossed his copy onto the pile of junk mail on the sideboard without a second glance. There, done, now. Colin, make that call. Get the money moving. I took my copy. I held it in both hands. I felt the texture of the raised seal under my thumb. It felt like armor. It felt like a sword. I will go scan this to the bank right now, I said. I will use the scanner in the study. Go, my mother waved me off. And then get your things. We need to leave for the airport in 2 hours. I walked into the study, but I did not scan anything to the bank. There was no bank hold. There was no red tape. The buyer had wired the money hours ago. It was sitting in Colin's escrow account waiting for the final signal. Instead, I pulled out my phone. I took a high-resolution photo of page 7, focusing on the initials and the clause. I took a photo of the notary seal. I opened the encrypted app. Claire. They signed, notarized. I have the physical copy. Elliot. Send me the image. I will file it with the state registry immediately. By the time they land in Europe, that severance is irrevocable. I sent the images. I walked back out into the hallway. The grandfather clock chimed the quarter hour. It was 1 o'clock. Brooke would be on a plane in 5 hours. They were laughing in the kitchen, opening a bottle of champagne to celebrate the sale. My father shouted from the kitchen, "Claire, come have a glass. We are toasting to Brooke's trip." "Coming," I called back. I hugged the folder tighter to my chest. They were toasting to a $28,000 victory. They had no idea they had just signed away a fortune that made the price of the SUV look like pocket change. They thought they had stripped me bare, but in the fine print of page 7, they had just handed me the keys to the kingdom. And the best part? They did it to themselves. The house did not look like a crime scene. It looked like a page out of a lifestyle magazine dedicated to the art of the expensive farewell. By 4 in the afternoon, the foyer was filled with luggage, not just any luggage, but a matched set of Louis Vuitton trunks that probably cost more than my entire college tuition. The air smelled of white roses and expensive Prosecco. My mother had organized a Bon Voyage open house, a quick 2-hour affair before the limousine arrived to whisk the happy couple to JFK. It was unnecessary, ostentatious, and exactly the kind of performative wealth my parents used to mask the rot beneath the floorboards. I stood near the kitchen island, nursing a glass of sparkling water. I was wearing black, a simple black turtleneck and black slacks. My mother had frowned when she saw me, muttering that I looked like I was going to a funeral. But she didn't push it. To them, my drab appearance was a sign of defeat. It was the visual confirmation that they had stripped me of my independence, leaving me a shadow in the corner while Brooke shone in the spotlight. And Brooke was shining. She was wearing a cream-colored cashmere travel set that looked impossibly soft. She held a glass of champagne in one hand and her phone in the other, broadcasting live to her audience. I watched her work the room. She moved from aunt to uncle, from neighbor to family friend, accepting their well wishes with a practiced humility that made my teeth ache. Then, she stopped in front of the fireplace, found her light, and held the phone up for a monologue. I drifted closer, staying just out of the frame, listening to the narrative being spun in real time. "Hey everyone," Brooke cooed into the camera, her voice dropping to that confessional whisper influencers use to feign intimacy. "I am just so overwhelmed by the love today. Leaving for Italy in a few hours feels like a dream, and honestly, it wouldn't be possible without family. We have all had to make sacrifices to make this happen, big sacrifices." She paused for effect, glancing briefly in my direction before looking back at the lens with a sad, brave smile. "Growing up is hard," she continued. "Sometimes, you have to let go of things you think you need, like material possessions or old habits, to really support the people you love. My sister Claire is learning that lesson today. It has been a tough week for her, transitioning to a more sustainable lifestyle, but I'm so proud of her for stepping up. Sometimes, family means giving up what you have so someone else can fly." I took a sip of water to wash down the bile. She was spinning the theft of my car as a spiritual lesson in minimalism. She was publicly patting herself on the back for my growth. My mother was standing nearby, holding court with the neighbors, Mrs. Gable, the notary from earlier, and a few members of the country club. "It is true," I heard my mother say, her voice carrying over the soft jazz playing on the speakers. "Claire has finally decided to be sensible. That SUV was just too much car for a single girl living in the city. The insurance, the parking fees, it was drowning her. We stepped in to help her liquidate it. Now she can focus on her career without that burden. She's being very mature about it." "Such a good girl." Mrs. Gable nodded, sipping her wine. It is rare to see young people listen to their parents these days. I leaned against the granite counter, my face a mask of blank resignation. Let them talk. Let them build this tower of lies as high as they wanted. The higher they built it, the longer the fall would be. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a single vibration. I slid it out, concealing the screen with my hand. It was a message from Elliot. The waiver is filed with the state registry. The separation is absolute. Also, the buyback entity is capitalized and ready. We can trigger the purchase of the vehicle debt from the buyer's financing arm as soon as the wire clears. But Claire, take a look at the attachment. You missed something in the initial scan. I frowned. I tapped the attachment. It was a credit report alert linked to my mother's social security number, access I had retained from when I helped her set up identity theft protection 3 years ago. I zoomed in on the PDF. Today, at 10:30 in the morning, just 30 minutes before I signed the waiver, my mother had taken out a short-term, high-interest bridge loan from a private lending firm. The amount was $15,000. I did the math instantly. The car sold for $28,000. The hotel in Positano was $30,000. The flights were likely another $5,000 or $6,000. They were still short. They had sold my car and still didn't have enough liquid cash to fund the level of luxury Brooke demanded. So, my mother had panicked and taken out a predatory loan to cover the difference, likely using the family assets as implied collateral. If I had not signed that waiver separating my financial identity from theirs today, and if my mother defaulted on that loan, which she almost certainly would, given their cash flow issues, that lender could have come after my assets to settle the debt. They could have frozen my accounts. They could have targeted the secret trust. A cold sweat broke out on the back of my neck. It was closer than I thought. They were not just greedy. They were reckless. They were willing to burn down the entire family's financial future for a week of pasta and sunsets. I closed the file and opened my email settings. I initiated the protocol I had prepared the night before. I changed the passwords to my personal email accounts, the ones my parents had access to for emergencies. I removed my phone number from the family group chat. I set up an autoresponder for their addresses that would direct them to Elliot's legal firm. I was locking the doors. When the storm hit, I would be watching from a fortress. Claire. The voice came from my left. I didn't need to look to know who it was. The smell of expensive, musky cologne gave him away. Colin Rusk slid up to the counter next to me. He was holding a glass of scotch, looking pleased with himself. He had successfully brokered the sale, pocketed his commission, and now he was enjoying the free booze. "You look thrilling," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Black really is your color. Very grieving widow." I turned to look at him. "I am grieving the death of common sense in this house. Colin." He chuckled, shaking his head. "You are still mad. I get it. Nobody likes losing their wheels. But come on, Claire, be realistic. You were never going to pay off that car loan in the long run. I did you a favor. I got you out from under a depreciating asset." "You got yourself a $4,000 commission," I corrected him flatly. "And you helped them steal $35,000 of equity from me. Business is business." He shrugged, leaning closer, invading my personal space. "But look, no hard feelings, right? I know things ended weirdly between us a few years ago, but seeing you today, handling this with such dignity, it is kind of sexy. You have this whole tragic heroine vibe going on." He lowered his voice, his eyes dropping to my lips. "Maybe, since you are going to be stuck taking the train now, I could give you a ride back to the city tonight? We could grab dinner, catch up. I could explain the investment side of what your dad is doing. You might actually learn something." The audacity was breathtaking. He had helped sell my car, and now he wanted to use the lack of that car to trap me in his passenger seat and hit on me. He thought I was desperate. He thought I was the same girl who used to beg for his approval. I turned my body fully toward him. I did not step back. I looked him dead in the eye. "Colin," I said, my voice low and steady, loud enough for him to hear, but quiet enough to keep the scene private. "You seem to be confused about what happened today. You think you played a player. You think you won. I think I closed a deal, he smirked. You chose a side, I said. You looked at me, and you looked at a quick commission check, and you decided the check was worth more than your integrity. That is fine. That is a choice. But do not stand here and pretend you are doing me a favor. And do not ever ask me to dinner again. His smile faltered. Whoa, relax. I was just trying to be nice. You are taking this way too seriously. It is just a car. And you are just a middleman, I said. And middlemen are the first ones to get squeezed when the deal goes bad. What is that supposed to mean? He asked, a flicker of unease crossing his face. It means enjoy the commission. Colin, I hope you spend it before the compliance audit hits. I didn't wait for his response. I walked away, leaving him staring at his scotch, wondering if I was bluffing. The room suddenly erupted in applause. My father was tapping a spoon against a champagne flute. Everyone! Everyone! He boomed, his face flushed with alcohol and pride. The limo is here. Let us send the happy couple off in style. Brooke squealed, grabbing her fiancé's hand. The guests surged forward, throwing handfuls of biodegradable confetti that my mother had ordered specifically for the Instagram aesthetic. I stood at the back of the room, near the French doors that led to the garden. I watched my parents hug Brooke. My mother was crying, dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief. My father was shaking his new son-in-law's hand, looking like a man who had conquered the world. Have the best time, my mother sobbed. You deserve it, baby, every single second of it. We will, Brooke shouted, blowing kisses. Bye, Claire, love you. She didn't wait for my response. She swept out the front door, trailing silk and entitlement, followed by the entourage of luggage that my car had paid for. The heavy oak door slammed shut. The house fell into a sudden, jarring silence, broken only by the chatter of the remaining guests. My father turned to the room, beaming. Well, that is done. Off to Italy. He spotted me standing by the garden doors. He walked over, clapping a heavy hand on my shoulder. See, he said, his breath smelling of scotch. That wasn't so hard, was it? You did good. Claire, you finally stepped up. I am proud of you. He squeezed my shoulder, a gesture of ownership. Now, he said, turning away, help your mother clean up this confetti. It is a mess. He walked off to refill his drink. I looked down at the confetti scattered on the hardwood floor, tiny white circles, like snow. I reached into my pocket and touched the cold metal of my phone. Elliot's text was still on the screen, just waiting for you to press the button. I unlocked the phone. I opened the banking app linked to the secret trust. I navigated to the transfer tab. I selected the option Elliot had set up: full liquidation and transfer to secure holding. I looked at my father's back. I looked at my mother, who was already complaining to a waiter about a wine stain on the rug. They thought the transaction was finished. They thought the books were balanced. I pressed confirm. The screen loaded for a second. A green checkmark appeared. Transfer successful. The secret account was empty. The funds were gone, moved to a jurisdiction they couldn't touch, under a name they didn't know. And with that transfer, the automated trigger I had set up for the car loan buyback initiated. I was no longer the daughter who lost a car. I was the creditor who owned their debt. I didn't help clean up the confetti. I turned around, opened the garden door, and walked out into the cool evening air. I walked past the empty spot in the driveway where my SUV used to be. I kept walking until I reached the end of the long driveway, where the Uber I had called 5 minutes ago was waiting. I got in. Where to? The driver asked. The train station, I said. And then, the future. The train ride back to the city was a blur of passing lights and the rhythmic clatter of wheels on steel, but my mind was operating with the quiet precision of a server room. I did not feel the sadness I expected, the grief over the car, over the betrayal, over the years of being the family scapegoat. It had all evaporated the moment I stepped out of that house. In its place was a cold, hard resolve. I was no longer a daughter seeking approval. I was an auditor closing a corrupt account. When I unlocked the door to my apartment, the silence that greeted me wasn't lonely. It was fortified. I tossed my keys on the counter, kicked off my shoes, and went straight to my workstation. I had 3 monitors set up, a stark contrast to the IT support setup my parents imagined I used. I powered them on, the screens humming to life with a soft blue glow. It was time to execute the protocol I had named Operation Clean Slate. First, I accessed the custodial account. For years, this account had been a ghost in the Hawthorne financial portfolio. My grandfather had seeded it with a modest sum, but he had invested it in aggressive tech index funds in the late 90s. My parents, too busy spending their own inheritance on status symbols and renovations, had lost the paperwork. They assumed it had withered away. They were wrong. I logged in. The balance stared back at me. It was not just a safety net. It was a war chest. With compounded interest and the market booms of the last decade, the total was in the mid-6 figures. It was more liquid cash than my parents had seen in 5 years. I didn't smile. I didn't cheer. I simply began typing. I initiated a series of wire transfers. I moved 80% of the funds into a new, irrevocable trust I had established in South Dakota, a state with some of the strongest asset protection laws in the country. I named the trust the Phoenix Group. The beneficiary was me, but the trustee was a corporate entity controlled by Elliot. Even if my parents hired a forensic accountant, which they couldn't afford, they would hit a brick wall. The money was now legally invisible to them. Next, I addressed the debts. I found a small student loan that my father had co-signed for me years ago. It was the only financial tether remaining that gave him any legal claim to manage my finances. The balance was $4,000. I paid it off in full. Expedited processing. I downloaded the confirmation letter. Paid in full. Obligation satisfied. Then came the masterstroke, the car. I opened a secure chat with Elliot. Claire, is the shell company ready? Elliot, Aurora Holdings LLC is active. We have the capital. Claire, execute the buy order on the SUV. Here was the beauty of the plan. Colin Rusk had sold my car to a flipper, an associate of his who bought luxury cars for cash to resell them at a markup. Colin had sold it for $28,000 to get my parents quick cash. The flipper had listed it immediately on a private dealer network for $35,000. I wasn't going to storm into the dealership and demand my car back. That was emotional. That was messy. Instead, Aurora Holdings LLC, a faceless company with a generic address in Delaware, sent an electronic offer to Colin's associate. We offered full asking price, $35,000, an immediate, no questions asked purchase. For a flipper, it was the perfect deal. They made $7,000 in less than 24 hours. Elliot, the offer is accepted. The wire is sent. The title is being transferred to Aurora Holdings as we speak. Claire, where is the vehicle now? Elliot, it is being moved to a private storage facility in Jersey City. It is off the market. As far as Colin and your parents know, it was sold to an anonymous buyer and shipped overseas. I leaned back in my chair. I effectively owned my car again. I had paid a premium for it. Yes, $7,000 more than my parents sold it for, but I had purchased something far more valuable than a vehicle. I had purchased control. The car was gone, to the world, and specifically to the Hawthorne family. It had vanished into the ether of the used car market. They would never see it parked in my driveway. They would assume I was taking the subway, miserable and defeated. They would let their guard down. And when the time was right, I would drive it right past them. But not yet. I turned my attention to the evidence. I created a new digital folder titled The Receipts. I began to populate it with the cold, hard facts of the last 48 hours. Exhibit A, the screenshot of the text message from my mother. We need you to sign. It is for the family. Exhibit B, the bill of sale showing the price, $28,000. Exhibit C, the quote for the Positano Hotel, $30,000. Exhibit D, the signed waiver, specifically page 7, showing they had voluntarily relinquished all claims to my assets. Exhibit E, The photocopy of the allowance check for $2,000, with the memo line written in my father's jagged handwriting, transition support. I arranged them chronologically. I stripped away the emotional context. I didn't add commentary about how it hurt. I didn't write about crying in my room. I simply let the numbers tell the story. The math was brutal. They sold an asset worth $35,000 for $28,000, kept $26,000, and gave me $2,000. It was not a family decision. It was a liquidation sale. I opened social media. I went to Brooke's profile. She was currently posting stories from the first-class lounge at JFK. Champagne toast. So blessed. Family is everything. I looked at the comments. My cousins were praising her. My aunts were liking every post. They were all buying the lie. They all thought I was the charity case, the screw-up who had to be bailed out by her generous parents. I could feel the anger simmering, but I tamped it down. Anger is useful, but only if it is cold. I drafted a post. I didn't publish it yet. I just wrote it, staring at the cursor blinking on the screen. Sometimes, the price of freedom is a silver SUV. Best money I ever spent. I saved the draft. Elliot messaged one last time. Elliot, the severance is filed. The car is secured. The money is moved. You are a ghost. Claire. They cannot touch a cent. And by the way, that clause you had me hide? It also voids their right to be beneficiaries on your life insurance. You might want to update your emergency contact. I smiled. I deleted my parents' names from my medical records portal. I deleted Brooke's name from my insurance policy. I walked to the window and looked out at the city skyline. Somewhere out there, my car was sitting in a dark, secure garage, waiting for my command. Somewhere in the banking cloud, my fortune was safe. And somewhere over the Atlantic, my family was drinking expensive wine, thinking they had won. They thought selling the car was the end. They thought they had closed the book on Claire Hawthorne. For me, it was just the opening act. The glow of the monitor was the only light in my apartment as the clock ticked past 9 in the evening. I had a cup of coffee in my hand, black and bitter, as I watched the digital stage set for my sister's grand performance. Brooke was live. She was sitting in what looked like the private suite of an international flight, holding a glass of vintage champagne. The lighting was flattering, smoothing out any stress lines, making her look like the epitome of the blushing, pampered bride. The caption on the stream read, "Love wins, off to Italy, honeymoon sacrifice gratitude." "I just want to hop on here before we take off," Brooke was saying, tilting her head to show off her diamond earrings. "I am reading all your comments, and I am literally crying. You guys are so sweet. It has been such a crazy week, so much drama, but so much love." The viewer count was climbing, 300, 400, the usual echo chamber of high school friends, distant relatives, and the Northlake elite who followed the Hawthorne drama like a soap opera. "People keep asking how we pulled this off," Brooke laughed, a tinkling, fake sound. "And honestly, it was a miracle. My parents are just heroes, and my sister, Claire. I know it was hard for her to let go of her car, but she really stepped up. It is like she finally realized that family is more important than things. We are all making sacrifices." Sacrifice. The word hung in the air like a bad smell. I glanced at the second monitor. I had the email drafted. It was a formal notification from Marsh & Associates Legal Counsel. Subject: Notice of asset severance and cease of communication. It was not a lawsuit. It was a declaration of independence. It informed Richard and Eleanor Hawthorne that, per the agreement signed this afternoon, all financial and legal ties were severed. It also formally requested that they cease all public mentions of my financial status, as it was now a private matter protected by the new non-disclosure implied in the waiver. I hit send. On the screen, Brooke continued to babble. "We are going to be staying at this amazing cliffside hotel. I will do a room tour as soon as we land." My phone buzzed. Once, twice, then a continuous vibration. My parents had received the email. I didn't answer. I texted back a single, pre-written line. All further communication must go through my legal counsel. Do not contact me personally. I turned my attention back to the live stream. The comments were scrolling fast. Aunt Linda. Have a safe flight. You deserve it. Cousin Sarah. Claire is lucky to have you to guide her. And then, I saw it. The opening I had been waiting for. A user named Sarah G, one of Brooke's frenemies from college who always asked the questions everyone else was thinking, typed a comment. Sarah G. Wait, I heard Claire's car got repoed? Is that true? Or did you guys actually sell it? Brooke froze for a microsecond. Her smile faltered. She quickly recovered, laughing nervously. Oh gosh, the rumor mill. Brooke rolled her eyes. No, nothing like that. It is complicated. It was a family decision to restructure some assets. Claire is totally fine with it. Don't believe everything you hear. Just trust that we are taking care of her. Taking care of her. That was it. That was the trigger. I switched tabs to my own social media. I had not posted in 2 years. My profile was a ghost town. But I knew that the moment I posted, the algorithm would push it to everyone mutual friend we had. I uploaded the image, a single carousel of 4 photos. Slide 1. The bill of sale. Sold. 2021. SUV. Price. $28,000. Slide 2. The check. Paid to the order of Claire Hawthorne. $2,000. Memo. Transition support. Slide 3. The waiver. Page 7. Highlighted. Family voluntarily relinquishes all claims. Slide 4. A screenshot of the Kelly Blue Book value of my car. Trade-in value. $35,000. I wrote a caption. Short, brutal, factual. Since there seems to be confusion about the sacrifice my sister is talking about, my car wasn't repossessed. It was sold by my parents for $28,000 to pay for Brooke's Hotel in Positano. I received $2,000 of that sale. I also signed a legal waiver today separating my finances from theirs permanently. I am not being taken care of. I am being liquidated. Enjoy the honeymoon. Brooke, you literally drove my car there. I hit post. I sat back and watched the digital world catch fire. It took about 30 seconds. First, the likes started trickling in. Then the comments on my post. What the actual hell? They sold your car for a vacation? Wait, is this real? Then, the tide shifted to Brooke's live stream. User 456. Brooke, did you see Claire's post? Sarah G. OMG, she posted the receipts. You guys sold her car for $28K and gave her $2K? That is messed up. Mike T. Wait, you are flying first class on your sister's car money? Brooke looked down at her phone, likely getting a frantic text from my mother. Her face went pale. The confident, glowing bride vanished, replaced by a deer in headlights. I don't know what you guys are talking about. Brooke stammered. Claire is she is emotional. She has always been jealous. Commenter 99. She posted the bill of sale. Brooke, it is signed by your dad. The chat turned hostile. The internet hates a villain, but it absolutely loathes a hypocrite who preaches about sacrifice while stealing from family. Then came the final twist, the one I hadn't explicitly planned but knew was inevitable. I tagged Colin Rusk in the comments of my own post. Special thanks to @ColinRuskBroker for facilitating the sale and taking his commission from the family fund. The internet sleuths did the rest instantly. Sarah G. on Brooke's Live. Wait, Colin Rusk? Claire's ex? He brokered the deal? That is so gross. Random user. So your ex-boyfriend helped your parents sell your car to fund your sister's trip? This family is toxic. Brooke was reading the comments now, her eyes darting back and forth. She looked around the cabin, as if looking for an escape route, but the plane doors were closed. She was trapped in a metal tube with Wi-Fi, and the signal was bringing nothing but hate. I have to go, Brooke said, her voice trembling. The flight attendants we have to turn off phones. Bye. The stream cut to black. I refreshed my feed. The comments on my post were exploding. My phone was vibrating off the table with calls from my father, my mother, and even Colin. I silenced it. I watched the notifications roll in. People I hadn't spoken to in high school were apologizing. Neighbors were expressing shock. The facade of the perfect Hawthorne family had not just cracked, it had been smashed with a sledgehammer. They had wanted a public narrative. They had wanted to use social media to paint themselves as saints and me as the charity case. I just gave them what they wanted, the truth. I took a sip of my cold coffee. It tasted better than champagne. I picked up my phone and saw a text from Elliot. Elliot, I just got a call from your father's lawyer, or at least, the guy he uses for estate planning. He is screaming about defamation. Claire, it is not defamation if it is true. Tell him to read page 7. Elliot, I did. He hung up. I stood up and walked to the window. The city lights were blurring in the distance. Somewhere, a plane was taxiing down a runway, carrying a bride who was currently having a panic attack, and parents who were realizing that their reputation had just been sold for the price of a used SUV. They had tried to bury me. They forgot that I was the one holding the shovel. The banging on my apartment door started at 9 in the morning. It was not the polite knock of a delivery driver or a neighbor. It was a frantic, rhythmic pounding that demanded attention. I knew who it was before I even checked the peephole. My building had a buzzer system, but my parents had possessed a spare key to the lobby entrance for years, another boundary I had failed to enforce until today. I opened the door. My mother, Eleanor, stood there. She was not wearing her usual armor of tailored tweed and pearls. Her hair was pulled back in a messy knot, her eyes were swollen, and she was clutching her phone like a lifeline. Behind her stood my father, Richard, looking less like a patriarch and more like a man whose bank account had just been frozen. Claire, my mother gasped, pushing past me into the living room without waiting for an invitation. You have to take it down, right now. You have to delete it. I closed the door slowly and turned to face them. I did not offer them coffee. I did not ask them to sit. Take what down? I asked, my voice flat. The post, she shrieked, her voice cracking. The receipts. Do you have any idea what you have done? Brooke has been crying for 6 hours. She is locked in the bathroom of the hotel suite. She refuses to go out to dinner because she is convinced the waiters know. She says the internet is calling her a thief. The internet is calling her a beneficiary of theft, I corrected calmly. There is a difference. Do not play semantics with me, my father growled, stepping forward. His face was a mottled red. You humiliated your sister on her wedding week. You humiliated us. The phone has not stopped ringing. The country club board called me. Claire, the board. They want to know if the rumors about our liquidity are true. Are they? I asked. The question hung in the air, sharp and cold. My father flinched. That is none of your business, he snapped. Your business is to fix this. You are going to log onto that computer, delete those photos, and write a public apology. You are going to say it was a misunderstanding. You are going to say the car was a gift you freely gave. I looked at him, really looked at him. For the first time in years, I saw the fear behind the anger. He wasn't mad because I was mean. He was mad because the curtain had been pulled back. No, I said. My mother let out a sound that was half sob, half scream. Claire, how can you be so cruel? We are family. We raised you. We put a roof over your head. We gave you everything. You gave me an eviction notice disguised as a car sale, I said. And then you gave me a check for $2,000 and told me to be grateful. We needed the money, my mother pleaded, switching tactics from anger to pity. She reached out to grab my hand, but I took a step back. It was an emergency. Claire, Brooke's happiness. It is fragile. You know how she gets when things aren't perfect. We just wanted her to have this one thing. We were going to pay you back, eventually. With what? I asked. The trust fund you drained? The credit cards you maxed out? You ungrateful little... My father took a breath, his hands balling into fists at his sides. You owe this family. We made you who you are. We supported you when you were floundering in your 20s. You have a duty to protect our reputation. I have a duty to protect myself, I said. And I realized something yesterday. Dad, family doesn't sell each other's cars and call it love. Family doesn't coerce signatures. Family doesn't protect the golden child by cannibalizing the other one. My father's phone rang. He pulled it out, looked at the screen, and grimaced. It is Brooke. He put it on speakerphone. Daddy? Brooke's voice filled the room. She sounded hysterical, the audio distorted by poor connection and sobbing. Daddy, did you make her fix it? People are tagging Colin. They are tagging the hotel. The concierge looked at me weirdly when I asked for extra towels. I want to go home. I can't stay here. It is a nightmare. Calm down, sweetheart, my mother cooed, leaning toward the phone. We are with her now. We are handling it. She ruined everything, Brooke screamed. I hate her. Tell her I hate her, and tell her she owes me for this trip. If we have to leave early because of the harassment, I want her to reimburse the cost of the flights. I let out a short, dry laugh. The audacity was truly a marvel of nature. Brooke, I said, speaking clearly toward the phone. Don't you talk to me, she screeched. You are dead to me. You signed the paper. Brooke, I said. You initialed page 7. You were so busy looking at your ring and thinking about your pasta that you didn't read what you were agreeing to. You signed away your right to complain. What is she talking about? Brooke demanded. Daddy, what is she talking about? My father ended the call abruptly. He shoved the phone back into his pocket and glared at me. That document, he said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. I spoke to our estate lawyer this morning. He looked at the picture you posted. And? He says you tricked us, my father said. He says you slipped a clause in there that wasn't in the draft we discussed. That is fraud. Claire, we can have that contract voided. We can sue you for deceptive practices. It was not fraud, I said, walking over to my desk and picking up the physical copy of the document I had kept safe. It was negligence. Yours. You had a notary present. You had a witness. Your own broker. Colin, you had ample time to read the document. You chose not to. You chose to rush because you wanted the wire transfer to clear before the bank closed. Greed made you blind. Dad, not me. It doesn't matter, he shouted. We are your parents. That clause, the one about the custodial account, you think that stands? You think you can just steal the family emergency fund? It wasn't a family fund, I said. It was a custodial account in my name, and as of yesterday, thanks to your signatures, the family has voluntarily relinquished all claims to it. It is gone. Dad, the money is moved. The account is closed. You can't touch it. You can't borrow against it. You can't use it to pay off the loan Mom took out yesterday. My mother went white. You know about the loan? I know everything, I said. I know about the $15,000 bridge loan. I know about the credit card debt. I know you sold my car not just for the honeymoon, but to cover the minimum payments on the house because you are drowning. My father looked like he had been slapped. The bluster, the arrogance, it all drained out of him, leaving behind a tired, frightened old man. You are our daughter, he whispered. How can you do this? How can you leave us with nothing? I didn't leave you with nothing, I said. I left you with the consequences of your own math. You sold my car. You got the money. You spent the money. That transaction is complete. We are square. But the post, my mother wept. The reputation. The truth is expensive, I said. If you didn't want people to know you sold my car, you shouldn't have sold my car. My father stared at me with a mixture of hatred and grudging respect. He realized, finally, that the dynamic had shifted. He wasn't talking to the girl who fixed the Wi-Fi anymore. He was talking to a creditor. We are leaving, he said, grabbing my mother's arm. But this isn't over. You are going to regret this. You are going to need us one day, Claire, and when you do, don't bother coming home. The locks will be changed. I smiled. It was a genuine smile, devoid of warmth but full of closure. Funny you should mention locks, I said. I picked up a small brass object from my desk and held it up. It was a key. "I know you have a key to this apartment," I said. "You used it to get into the lobby today, but you won't be using it to get into my life anymore." "What have you done?" my mother asked, trembling. "I have already called the management company," I said, "and I have a locksmith coming in an hour to rekey this door, but more importantly, the car." "What about the car?" my father snapped. "It is gone. Colin shipped it." "Colin sold it to an LLC, I said. "Aurora Holdings. Does that sound familiar?" My father frowned. "No." "It shouldn't," I said. "It is a holding company, my holding company." Silence descended on the room. Absolute, suffocating silence. "You bought it?" my mother whispered. "I bought the debt," I clarified. "Technically, I own the contract now, which means I get to decide where that car goes. It is not going to Europe. It is not going to a scrapyard. It is going to be parked exactly where I want it to be, as a reminder." You bought your own car back?" My father looked confused, his brain struggling to comprehend the financial gymnastics. "Why? Why not just stop the sale?" "Because I needed you to show me who you were," I said. "And you did. You sold me out for $28,000. Now I know my price." I walked to the door and held it open. "Get out," I said. "Claire," my mother started. "Get out," I repeated. "And tell Brooke to enjoy the pasta. It cost her a sister." They walked out. My father didn't look back. My mother looked back once, her eyes filled with a terrifying realization that she had lost the only child who could have actually saved them. I closed the door. I threw the deadbolt. Half an hour later, the locksmith arrived. He was a burly man with a toolbox and a cheerful whistle. "Just a rekey, miss?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "And I want the high-security cylinder, the one that can't be duplicated without a keycard." "Got it," he said, getting to work. "Break-in?" "Something like that," I said, watching him dismantle the old lock. "Someone tried to steal something valuable." "Jewelry?" he asked. "No," I said. "My boundaries." I watched as the old lock fell to the floor with a metallic clatter. It was the sound of the final tether snapping. My phone buzzed on the counter. It was a notification from the bank. The new trust structure was finalized. The assets were locked. I picked up the old key, the one my parents had used, and dropped it into the trash can. Let them bang on the door. Let them scream. Let them threaten. The door was new. The lock was new. And the person standing on this side of it was someone they didn't know anymore. The fallout did not happen all at once. It was not a sudden explosion, but rather a slow, agonizing structural collapse, like a building whose foundation had been eroded by water over decades. My parents and sister had built their lives on the perception of wealth and moral superiority. I simply removed the load-bearing wall of their lies, and gravity did the rest. It started at the North Lake Country Club. My mother had held a seat on the social committee for 15 years. It was her throne. But 2 days after my post went viral, she arrived for the weekly luncheon to find her seat occupied by Mrs. Mao Galloway, a woman my mother had spent years looking down on. There was no confrontation. There was no shouting match. There was just the polite, icy exclusion that the wealthy practice so well. The other women simply did not make eye contact. They did not ask about the honeymoon. They did not ask about the car. They talked over her, around her, and through her, until my mother, suffocating in the vacuum of her own irrelevance, feigned a migraine and left before the salad course. The rumor mill had shifted. It was no longer about a rebellious daughter. The narrative was now about financial insolvency. In our world, being cruel to your children was a character flaw, but being broke was a cardinal sin, and selling a child's car to fund a vacation screamed broke. Colin Rusk was the next domino to fall. I did not have to lift a finger to destroy him. The financial industry is built on the fragile currency of trust, and Colin had spent his by mixing a personal vendetta with a professional transaction. When I tagged him in the post, I did not just alert his friends, I alerted his compliance officer. selling a vehicle below market value to a known associate, while acting as a fiduciary for a family trust, raised red flags for money laundering and conflict of interest. Elliot sent me the update on a Tuesday afternoon. Colin had been terminated from his firm effective immediately. The official reason was violation of internal trading policies, but the real reason was that he had become a liability. No client wanted a broker who would sell them out for a $4,000 commission. I saw him once, from a distance, walking out of a gym in the city with a box of his personal effects. He looked smaller. The swagger was gone, replaced by the hunch of a man who realized he had bet on the wrong horse. Then there was Brooke. She returned from Italy 4 days early. There were no "welcome home" banners. There was no limousine. She took a standard Uber from the airport to her apartment, dragging her Louis Vuitton trunks across the pavement herself. The Honeymoon had turned into a public relations nightmare. A travel luggage brand that had sent her free gear in exchange for posts sent her a cease and desist email, demanding she remove their tags from her content. They did not want their logo associated with financial abuse. A luxury swimwear line quietly canceled her upcoming sponsorship deal. Her follower count was not dropping, but the engagement had turned toxic. Every photo of pasta or sunsets was met with comments like, "Did Claire pay for the Parmesan?" and "Is the view worth your sister's dignity?" She could not block them all. The algorithm had turned against her. She was no longer an influencer. She was a cautionary tale. I continued to go to work. I continued to audit systems and secure data. But in the evenings, I put the secret account to use. I did not buy a penthouse. I did not buy jewelry. I did not buy a new wardrobe to flaunt in their faces. That is what they would have done. Instead, I established the Hawthorne Marsh Grant. I used $50,000 from the accrued interest in the custodial account to fund a vocational program for underprivileged youth in Connecticut who wanted to enter cybersecurity but could not afford the certifications. I set it up through a blind trust, but I insisted on one specific detail. The launch would be public, and the source of the funding would be transparent. The press release went out a week after Brooke returned. Local cybersecurity expert launches scholarship fund for tech education. The local paper picked it up, then the state news. It was a feel-good story. A young, self-made woman giving back to the community. My parents saw the headline and saw an opportunity. They showed up at the small press event I held at the community center. They were dressed in their Sunday best, smiling as if they were the guests of honor. They walked in with the arrogance of people who believed they could rewrite history just by showing up. My father approached the reporter from the North Lake Gazette. "We are just so proud of Claire," I heard him say, his voice booming with false paternal pride. "We always taught her the value of charity. It is a Hawthorne tradition to give back. This fund, it is really a reflection of the values we instilled in her. The family is fully behind this initiative." My mother chimed in, touching the reporter's arm. "Yes, we have always supported Claire's ambitions. It is wonderful to see our family resources being used for such a noble cause." They were trying to co-opt my generosity. They were trying to use my good deed to scrub the stain from their reputation. They wanted the headline to change from "Claire Hawthorne Launches Fund" to "Hawthorne Family Donates to Charity." I stood on the small stage, watching them work the room. I felt a familiar flash of anger, but I let it cool into resolve. I walked to the microphone. "Thank you all for coming," I said. The room quieted. My parents beamed at me from the front row, looking for all the world like supportive pillars of the community. "I want to clarify something regarding the funding of this grant," I continued, my voice steady. "There has been some confusion, and I want to ensure complete transparency." My father nodded encouragingly, thinking I was about to thank them. I pulled a piece of paper from my pocket. It was not a speech. It was a photocopy of page 7. "The $50,000 seeding this grant comes from a custodial account that was legally severed from the Hawthorne family estate 2 weeks ago," I said. "This money exists solely because of the hard work of my grandfather, and it is available today only because Richard and Eleanor Hawthorne voluntarily signed a waiver relinquishing all claims to it." The smiles on my parents' faces froze. "I have the document here," I said, holding it up. "It states clearly that the family has no financial interest, contribution, or connection to my assets. Therefore, while I appreciate my parents being here as spectators, it would be legally inaccurate to credit the Hawthorne family estate for this donation. This is an independent act, funded by independent assets, free from their control." The reporter's pen was moving furiously across his notepad. The flash of a camera went off, capturing my parents' expressions. They looked like wax figures melting under a heat lamp. "This grant is for the kids who have to build their own safety nets," I concluded. "Because sometimes, the people who are supposed to catch you are the ones who cut the rope." I stepped down. My parents did not stay for the refreshments. They turned and walked out, their heads down, fleeing the scene of their second public humiliation. They realized then that there was no coming back. They could not spin this. They could not charm their way out of it. I had used their own legal signature to build a wall they could not climb. That night, I received a text from Brooke. It was not angry, it was defeated. "Brooke, Mom is drinking in the dark. Dad is talking about selling the lake house. Are you happy now?" I looked at the message. Was I happy? Happiness was a soft word. I felt something harder, more durable. I felt secure. "Claire, I am not happy that it came to this. Brooke, but I am safe, and for the first time in my life, I am solvent. Good luck with the house." I blocked her number. The dominoes had all fallen, the social standing, the professional reputation, the financial stability. It was all in ruins. But there was one final piece of business to attend to. The car? It was still sitting in the secure garage in Jersey City. I had paid $35,000 to buy back the contract. I owned the debt. I owned the title. My parents still believed it was gone. They thought it had been shipped to Europe or sold to some unsuspecting buyer in another state. They thought the physical evidence of their betrayal had vanished, leaving only the digital scars. They were wrong. I called Elliot. "Is the transfer complete?" I asked. "The title is in your name," Elliot confirmed. "Aurora Holdings has officially transferred ownership to Claire Hawthorne. It is your car again, legally and physically." "Good," I said. "Have it detailed. I want it looking brand new. I want it to shine." "What are you going to do with it, Claire?" Elliot asked. "You live in the city. Parking is a nightmare." "I am not going to park it in the city," I said. "I am going to park it where it belongs." "And where is that?" "You will see," I said. "I need one last favor. Elliot, I need you to hire a flatbed truck, a specific kind, the kind with clear glass sides, used for transporting high-end luxury vehicles to showrooms." "You want to put a used SUV in a glass display truck?" Elliot laughed, a dry sound of appreciation. "That is theatrical, even for you." "It is not theater," I said. "It is an exhibit. I want them to see exactly what they sold, and I want them to see who bought it." "Consider it done," Elliot said. "When do you want it delivered?" "Tomorrow," I said. "At noon, right in the middle of the Sunday brunch rush at the house." I hung up. I walked to my closet and pulled out a box. Inside were the spare keys to the SUV, the ones I had kept hidden in a hollowed-out book for emergencies. I held them in my hand. They were heavy, substantial. My parents had sold my car to fund a lie. They had tried to erase my independence to maintain their facade. Tomorrow, I was going to return the car, but I wasn't giving it back. I was putting it on display as a monument to their failure. The secret account was empty. The charity was funded. The reputation was corrected. Only the silver SUV remained, and when it rolled down that driveway tomorrow, it would be the final nail in the coffin of the Hawthorne family myth. The meeting was set for noon on Sunday at a neutral location. I chose a conference room at a high-end hotel in downtown Hartford, halfway between my apartment and the North Lake estate. It was a glass-walled room, transparent and cold, exactly the environment I needed for the final act. I arrived 15 minutes early. Elliot was already there, sitting at the head of the mahogany table, organizing a slim stack of files. Beside him sat Sarah, my best friend from college. Sarah was the one who had picked me up at the train station at 2 a.m. when I fled the house years ago. She was the one who drove me to job interviews when my parents refused to co-sign a loan. She was the only person in the room who knew what it felt like to have nothing. "Are you ready?" Elliot asked, glancing at his watch. "I have been ready for 29 years, I said, taking the seat opposite the door. At 12 o'clock sharp, the heavy oak doors opened. My parents walked in first. Richard looked tired. His shoulders slumped in a suit that suddenly seemed a size too big. Eleanor was wearing sunglasses indoors, likely to hide the puffiness of her eyes. Brooke trailed behind them, looking less like a bride and more like a cornered animal. They were followed by Mr. Sterling, their estate lawyer, who looked like he would rather be literally anywhere else. They stopped when they saw me. They saw the calm posture. They saw the lack of tears. And they saw the distinct absence of the checkbook they had hoped I would bring. "Claire," my mother began, her voice trembling with a mixture of hope and desperation. "Thank you for agreeing to meet. We want to put this behind us. The family needs to heal." "Sit down," I said. They sat. My father cleared his throat, trying to summon the ghost of his former authority. "Look, Claire," he started, placing his hands on the table. "We know things got out of hand. The post, the comments. It has been brutal. But we are willing to forgive the public embarrassment if you are willing to come to the table. We need to discuss the bridge loan. If we can pool our resources." "Stop," I said. I slid a single piece of paper across the polished wood. It was the original copy of the document they had signed on the day they sold my car. The notary seal was raised and crinkled. "I am not here to pool resources," I said. "I am here to clarify the terms of the agreement you already signed." Mr. Sterling leaned forward, squinting at the document. "We are contesting the validity of that waiver. Ms. Hawthorne, we believe there was a lack of informed consent regarding the specific clauses." "There was a notary," Elliot interjected smoothly. "There was a witness provided by your side. And there was a literate adult signatory. There is no court in Connecticut that will overturn this." I pointed to the paper. "Dad, I want you to read page 7, paragraph 3, out loud, for the record." "I know what it says," my father muttered, looking away. "Read it," I commanded. My voice did not rise, but the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. My father sighed, picked up the paper, and began to read. His voice was flat, defeated. "The undersigned parties hereby voluntarily and irrevocably waive, release, and relinquish any and all rights, claims, titles, or interests in any financial accounts, trusts, or custodial instruments bearing the name of Claire Hawthorne, regardless of the origin of the initial deposit." He stopped. The room was silent. "Keep going," I said. "This waiver serves as a total separation of financial entities," he read, his voice barely a whisper, "granting the primary signatory sole and exclusive authority over said instruments effective immediately." He dropped the paper. "Do you know what that means, Dad?" I asked. "It means you kept the $2,000, he spat. "Fine, you win. You got your little allowance." "No," I said. "It means I kept the custodial account." My mother froze. "What custodial account? That old thing? It has been empty for years." "That is what you thought," I said, "because you were too lazy to check. You were too busy buying boats and renovating kitchens to realize that grandfather's initial investment in tech stocks in the 90s didn't just sit there. It grew. It compounded." Brooke looked up, her eyes wide. "How much?" "Enough," I said. "Enough that when you signed that waiver to get $28,000 for a hotel room, you walked away from a portfolio worth mid-six figures. You traded a fortune for a vacation. Brooke?" The silence that followed was absolute. It was the sound of air leaving a room. My mother made a small, choking noise. My father turned a shade of gray I had never seen before. You knew," my father whispered. "You let us sign." "You made me sign," I corrected him. "You threatened to kick me out. You told me I was useless. You told me I didn't understand the paperwork. Well, Dad, I understood it perfectly. I just let you be right. Mr. Sterling closed his folder. He knew it was over. There was no legal recourse. They had signed it away voluntarily, with a witness. For consideration, they received and spent. So that is it? Brooke screamed, standing up, her chair scraping violently against the floor. You are just going to keep it all? While we lose the house? While I get humiliated? We are sisters. We are blood. Sit down, Brooke, I said. I am not done. I nodded to Sarah. She stood up and walked to the window, pulling back the heavy velvet curtains. Down below, parked directly in front of the hotel entrance, was a flatbed truck, and on the back of that truck, shining under the afternoon sun, was my silver SUV. My parents stared at it. They looked like they were seeing a ghost. The car, my mother breathed. You said you bought the debt. I did, I said. I own the title. I own the car. It is fully paid off. No loans, no liens. It is 100% mine. So you are taking it back, my father said, a bitter sneer forming on his lips. You came here to rub it in our faces that you have a car and we don't. No, I said. I don't want it. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the keys. I placed them on the table. That car represents everything I hate about this family, I said. It represents control. It represents the idea that your love is conditional on what I own or what I give you. If I keep it, I am just holding on to the trauma. I slid the keys across the table, but I did not slide them to my father. I did not slide them to Brooke. I slid them to Sarah. Sarah, I said, you drove me to work for 3 years when I couldn't afford a Metro pass. You bought me dinner when my parents forgot to send my allowance. You are the only family that acted like family. Sarah looked at the keys, then at me, her eyes filled with tears. Claire, are you sure? It is legally transferred to your name as of this morning, I said. Happy birthday. Brooke let out a shriek of pure, unadulterated rage. You are giving it to her? Brooke screamed, pointing a trembling finger at Sarah. She is a stranger. I am your sister. I need a car. My lease is up next month. Then take the bus, I said cold. Or ask Dad to sell another one of his assets. Oh wait, he doesn't have any left. My father stood up, shaking with fury. You are vindictive. You are cruel. You are destroying your own flesh and blood for sport. I am not destroying you, I said, standing up to meet his gaze. I am just letting you live with the budget you created. You sold my car. You signed the waiver. You took the loan. These are your choices. Dad, I am just the auditor. We are blood, Brooke wailed, slamming her hands on the table. Doesn't that mean anything to you? I looked at her. I looked at the tears that were only falling because she had lost, not because she was sorry. Blood is biology, Brooke, I said. It is not a license to steal from me, and it is certainly not a credit card with no limit. I picked up my bag. I nodded to Elliot. We are done here, I said. I turned and walked toward the door. Sarah grabbed the keys and followed me, looking at the car outside with disbelief. Claire, my mother cried out, her voice breaking. If you walk out that door, do not think you can come back when the money runs out, when you are alone. I stopped. I didn't turn around. Mom, I said, I have been alone in this family for 29 years. This is the first time I have ever felt free. I pushed the doors open and walked out into the lobby. The air was cool and recycled, but it felt like oxygen. Behind me, the conference room was silent, save for the sound of Brooke sobbing and my father muttering curses at a lawyer who couldn't save him. They were sitting there with their signatures, trapped in a cage of their own making. I walked out of the hotel and onto the sidewalk. Sarah ran ahead to the truck to claim her gift. I watched her for a second, smiling. My phone buzzed in my hand. It was a message from Elliot, who was still in the room, finalizing the departure. Elliot, Mr. Sterling just resigned as their counsel, And your father is asking if the waiver can be unnotarized. It is over, Claire. The separation is absolute. I looked at the screen. I typed 3 words. Claire. Locked. Forever. I put the phone in my pocket and walked toward the train station. I didn't need a car. I had my own 2 feet. And for the first time, the ground beneath them was solid. Thank you so much for listening to this story. It was a wild ride from start to finish. And I hope you enjoyed seeing justice served cold. I am really curious. Where are you tuning in from right now? Are you listening on your commute? At the gym? Or maybe relaxing at home? Let me know in the comments below. I love reading your stories and seeing where our community is growing. Please do not forget to subscribe to Lila Revenge Stories. Hit that like button if you enjoyed Claire's victory, and smash that hype button to help this story reach more people who need a reminder that sometimes the best revenge is simply living well. See you in the next video.